too. I saw this and I was like, this is gonna be a little bit of a stretch, but we need to do this one.
Oh, we totally need to do it, and I don't think it's a stretch, it's kind of a rags to riches story, you
Yeah,
know?
like, it's the how is Stephen King successful from his own mouth? Kind of, I feel like is a valuable topic to discuss.
Yes, exactly, it proves that you can make money by doing something you love. It is out there.
Okay, let me read this intro. Growing up as a child of a single working class mother, Stephen King was no stranger to living hand to mouth. His drive, ambition, and his willingness to embrace the darkest corners of his psyche helped push him to the top of the bestseller list, where he joins the ranks of William Shakespeare, Agatha Christie, and Danielle Steele as some of the most successful authors of all time. Today, we're talking about grit, ambition, and how you define success through the documentary Stephen King: A Necessary Evil. You're listening to Real Stories, Real Problems with Rachael and Roxanne.
Hi, Rachel, how are you doing this week?
I'm good. How are you?
I am psyched, we're talking about the king, baby. Last week, I think it was last week, we were talking about how he published Carrie in 1974. I
Yeah.
mean, the man's been writing for 5 decades. You know, he averages like a book every 40 minutes. And so, so that is where a lot of horror fans, first discover the genre. And, I think he's, up there with Lovecraft, as in like, the father of modern horror. Poe, I mean, they mentioned Poe, Lovecraft, King. Those are like the three biggies when it comes to classic horror.
Absolutely. Among the best of the best. And I think he really understands in a real way the average American and the lives they live and kind of the way that their brains work and operate. And I think that's part of why he's so successful is because he is
Yes.
kind of the everyman. Um,
Yes.
yeah, for sure. And he definitely speaks to a much wider audience than like Lovecraft, who has a very kind of niche market, but he's incredibly popular, incredibly famous.
Right.
But most people haven't read Lovecraft. And I think the opposite can be said for King.
Unfortunately. Oh, definitely, definitely. And the thing with a lot of King's protagonists, I mean, I've often said that the things that King writes that really frightens me aren't the supernatural things like the vampires and it and stuff like that. It's the things that could really happen. Cough, The Stand, cough, the dead zone and Trump, cough, Trump, you know. And I
Oh,
think you even mentioned Trump in your notes, right?
yeah,
For the
probably at
debate?
least a couple of times.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah,
yeah,
this documentary was released in 2020, and I'm noticing a
yeah.
huge number of the documentaries that we have watched came out in 2020, and I have to wonder if maybe production companies were like, we just need content. And so they were pulling all the documentaries that people had been submitting and being like, yes, just publish it all.
Yeah,
Because there's a lot of them.
I looked back on our episodes. I looked back on our episodes. This is the third documentary we're doing that was filmed in 2020. So yeah, gee, what could possibly have been going on back then?
So in 2020, outside of the pandemic, uh,
So take us there.
the United States was facing an invasion of Asian giant hornets, which were threatening domestic bees. The FBI confirmed that the 2019 Naval Air Station Pensacola shooting was the first terrorist attack on U.S. territory that had been directed by a foreign actor since 9/11. The FBI arrested Ghislaine Maxwell,
Mhm.
who was an associate of Jeffrey Epstein, in New Hampshire. And then rapper Kanye
Right.
West announced his candidacy in the 2020 presidential election, because God knows. But yeah, outside of the pandemic, that's kind of what was going on in 2020. And then this documentary was actually, when I went and looked up, it looks like it was originally a French language documentary and then they
Mhm.
re-recorded it in English.
Mhm.
So it explained a little bit of why it didn't feel like an American documentary quite, but it was
Oh,
still,
yeah, it definitely didn't translate down directly. I mean, French can be idiomatic, certainly not as idiomatic as English, but there were a few sentences was like, "Wait, what?" And, like, rewind around. "Oh, okay, now I get it."
yeah.
But fascinating just the same. Oh my god.
And in general, this documentary was about why Stephen King is so incredibly successful. Because most writers, the statistic as I understand it, is that most writers will never make more than $6,000 in a year. That is the average amount that a writer can bring in. Most writers are writing for free, or maybe
Yeah.
a couple $100 a year on the side as they're self-publishing stuff on Amazon kind of thing. Uh,
Right, or on spec, trying to drum up clients.
yeah,
Like a drug dealer, the first one's free, after that you gotta pay. Uh-huh.
yeah, but to be able to tap into Americana and become as successful as he was, it was partly a mindset because it opens with it's a lot of clips of Stephen King and other interviews as they're going through and kind of telling the story of his life. And at
Mhm.
one point in the beginning, he said, "People ask what scares me, and everything scares me." So he finds the horror in literally everything and uses that to kind of launch his writing.
There was, if I briefly may, there's a Family Guy little clip where, Stephen King's in his literary agent's office, and the agent goes, "All right, what do you have now?" And Stephen King looks around like panic-stricken, he grabs his desk lamp, and he goes, "It's about a haunted lamp." And the guy goes, "You're not even trying anymore, are you? It's about a haunted lamp." "Fine, here's $10,000,000." That's of course an absurdist take on it, but it is a beautiful example of how Stephen King everything, like he said, he's afraid of everything. In the right hands, anything can be terrifying.
Yep, and not included in this documentary, but in the audio voiceover track of the original Stephen King It miniseries from like the 90s.
Oh.
They're talking
The one with Gary Sinise, right? The one with Gary Sinise and Molly
that was
Ringwald?
that was The Stand.
Oh, The Stand, sorry.
In the
Yeah,
original it was John Ritter and
right.
yeah,
And Harry Anderson and yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Um but in the like voiceover track for that, John Ritter is talking and he says, I was at a basketball game with my son, and we were sitting behind Stephen King and his son. So we were one level up from them, and my son kicked over a soda and it spilled and it ran under their feet. And Stephen King looked up and said, "Wouldn't it be weird if that was blood?" So that's just how his brain works all the time.
That's the way his mind works. That's great. And I'm surprised a short story didn't erupt from this. Oh my god, that's funny. That would be my luck. I'd be so starstruck I'd accidentally spill something on Stephen King. It would just be, yeah. It's great.
But yeah, he talks in this documentary about, he says he thinks people enjoy horror in part because it's fun,
Mhm,
but also because
mhm.
it provides like an outlet for fear and aggression. And that he's quoted as saying society gives points for good emotional behavior, but we all have
Mhm.
feelings that tend towards like sadism and that kind of thing. And horror stories and movies give us a chance to exercise that part of ourselves in a relatively harmless way.
Spot on, spot on. That's the basic psychology of fear. My friends ask me who aren't into horror, they're like, Why do you like this stuff so much? Why do you love?" And I said, "Well, okay, first of all, it's like gory stuff. It's over the top and it's funny. You know, it's goofy, it's funny to laugh at. the deep psychological horror, believe it or not, is therapeutic for me. Like psychiatrically, like my psychiatrist thinks it's healthy for me to watch movies like that because that way 'cause it's just a movie, it's just a movie, it's just a movie. If I'm in a bad mood and I watch a slasher, go get him, go get him, go get him, and it's cathartic to be afraid knowing you're not in any danger. It's that dopamine rush, it's that adrenaline high when you know you're not really in danger because your body doesn't know that. Your adrenal glands don't know that you're not really in danger, you know? So that's why I find that extremely helpful psychologically, emotionally, and it's healthier than punching, Donald Trump in the face. So, and not a felony, and not a felony. So,
That's the big one. Uh, but yeah, I
yeah, yeah.
love I love horror so much, and I feel like it's because I
Mhm.
have pretty severe anxiety, among other things, and I am basically low level afraid of everything all the time, and so this gives me kind of an
Yeah,
outlet
me
for that
too.
in a way where I'm not in any kind of danger. It just lets me
Right,
feel those feelings that are coursing through my body without having the panic that comes with dealing with everyday life. It's beautiful. I
right.
highly recommend it.
Right, and especially with a horror movie, if you do find yourself getting too afraid, you can turn it off.
Yeah.
Or, if you're reading a horror novel, you can put it down for a few weeks if it's bothering you. Find something else to do. In a real life situation with a gun pointed at your head and a guy mugging you, you can't say, dude, I'm having a bad day. Can we reschedule this mugging for later in the week? No.
Yeah, but he talks very openly about how he has always been like this. He has always been a kid who leaned into the scary and the frightening. And
Hmm.
I've also been rereading because I've read it before, Stephen King's On Writing.
On
And
writing. Hmm.
it's a wonderful book where he talks about how he became a writer and his process in that and how the tools he uses kind of as a writer, but his whole lead up to how he got there. And as a child, he and his family were pretty poor. His father walked out on them when he was 2, and his mother worked
Yeah.
low-wage jobs at bakeries
Right.
and laundries and he doesn't know exactly because he was a little kid, but he does remember that they were evicted from their home when he was 5 years old because the landlord came by and saw that his older brother was crawling around on the roof, and he was looking out the window watching his brother, and his mom was nowhere to be found because she was at work.
This doesn't surprise me. If you know anything about Robert King, he's an engineer. He's a mechanical engineer and he's fucking brilliant. And a lot of times when Steven has mechanical questions like would this really work? Like in Dolan's Cadillac, for example, he wanted to know like exactly what the mechanics were. He called his brother, and his brother, being an engineer, not only wrote it all out, but made a videotape with Matchbox cars. So I am not surprised that Bob King was crawling around on the roof at a younger age.
Yeah, and he talks about how he missed most of the first grade because he got a serious case of the measles that turned into strep throat, which caused inflamed tonsils that had to be removed. And so basically, he was down for the count for a year. And during that time,
Yeah,
he was at home reading comic books and, other stories. And he just eventually decided to start writing his own. And he started
right.
selling horror stories he had written to other kids in elementary school. This has been, how he came up with pocket money to go to the movies and stuff. So writing has been a form of income for him since he was in like second grade.
Yeah, exactly. In his stories now as well, A Secret Window, Secret Garden is the first thing that comes to my mind, but many of his protagonists are writers, because it's write what you know, obviously, and pretty awful things happen to sometimes. So I think it's wonderful that he's able to go, yeah, I screwed that up when I was 10. Let's try fixing it 60 years later and see how it goes. That's wonderful.
Yeah. And then when he was a teen, he was like 13, 14. They Charles Starkweather, the serial
Yes.
killer, had been famous, and there were like a bunch of news stories that were going on about this guy who was going on a murder spree in Nebraska. And Stephen King had been collecting clippings to follow his kind of serial killer career. So he had all about
Yeah.
girlfriend Carly Ann Fugate and about all the victims. And they his mom kind of said to him, why are you interested in this guy? And he said
As my mom would have too. My mom would be like, okay, watching Criminal Minds faithfully is one thing, but now you've got a scrapbook and we need to talk. Yeah.
and he explained that he said his face was like a double zero, like his that there was blank, that he couldn't
Yeah.
feed anything into this guy. And he wanted to know everything there is to know in case he ever ran into him or someone like him. And that he kind of knew that his inner writer knew that this was going to be the source of his career forever, that this was the thing that was going to
Right.
launch him, and he wanted to do that research as a writer. And luckily
Right.
his family seemed to say that's good enough, and they did not load him into super detailed therapy, because otherwise I don't think we could get all this work.
As they would want to do today. Right. Exactly.
It was a thing he's been fascinated with since he was a child. He was really broke as a kid. He was dealing with all of this stuff. But as he kind of came of age and started in college, he was writing like
Right.
rocky romance novels and selling stories to men's magazines, which he did acknowledge in the documentary that he thinks he was among, or maybe not in the documentary, maybe it was the book, but he does acknowledge that he thinks he was among the last generation of writers to be able to make a living writing stories for like Dude and
Hmm.
Swank and that kind of thing.
Right. Right. And the only one I could ever also was Harlan Ellison. That he started out the same way in the 60s, writing for Gent and Penthouse, and a couple that are no longer in publication, because of course they paid by the penny, or by the word, by penny a word. And that's how Harlan Ellison managed to make a living. And he did odd jobs and stuff like that, but that was his main source of writing income, to keep practicing while he was working on his more serious stuff. So, those magazines, they really do serve a purpose. Like the old joke, what are you doing with this Penthouse? Oh, I just read it for the articles. Some did, apparently.
Yeah, and when I look back kind of at the history of people who have written professionally, there are moments in
Mhm.
time where you can see people leaned into an opportunity that nobody else knew was there. Right after World War II,
Mhm.
Ernest Hemingway and a bunch of writers and painters and stuff went to France because it was cheap to live in a bombed out barn for no money, and you could really take the time
Right.
to develop a career, even if you didn't have any income,
Yep.
because it didn't cost anything to live there. And so we have a whole
Sure.
generation of work that came out of that that just was astounding. And then when you get into the 60s and early 70s, you get this generation of people who are paying the bills writing stories for short horror zines or for, Swank and Penthouse,
Mhm. Mhm.
and then now that's gone. And then there was a generation that started with their own blogs, and then those got viewed by people and turned them into writers. Jenny Lawson is my favorite
Mhm.
one of those. So
Oh, nice.
being able to see where there's opportunity is an
Right.
incredible skill that Stephen King has in spades. Like, this is a thing that he has always seen.
Absolutely. And without the internet, without, like you said, you mentioned Jenny Lawson. I have a couple of her books too. My favorite blogger is Ali Brosh from Hyperbole and a Half. She's as nuts as we are. I mean, um, but see, I wouldn't know about her if I hadn't been just like dicking around on the internet, and I certainly wouldn't have gone out and spent actual money on the books. I mean, there's Stephen King managed to make a name for himself during a time when a lot of horror writers had to kind of be underground because it wasn't considered high literature. I mean, unless of course you were Bram Stoker or Lovecraft or what, the classics. My one of my very favorite Stephen King incidents is he was in Home Depot, which is a weird enough concept as it is. There is like because Stephen King does his own gutters on his house. I don't know. So he's in Home Depot. And this little old lady in a wheelchair rolls up to him and she goes, "Excuse me, are you Stephen King?" And he went, "Yes, I am." And she goes, "You write all that horror stuff?" And he went, "Yes, I do write a lot of horror." And then she goes, "Well, I don't like it." And she goes, "I like uplifting things like that Shawshank Redemption." And Stephen King goes, "I wrote that too." And she looks him up and down and goes, "No, you didn't," and wheels off.
That's too
"No,
funny.
you didn't." Great. Oh, that's so wonderful. And I do love a lot. I love most of Stephen King's non-horror stuff as well. Because he's just such a brilliant craftsman. And it comes from all his life experience. I mean, between Vietnam, his certainly his battle with drugs, with cocaine, his horrible accident when he got mowed over by a van, and then the addiction to the painkillers that came from that. I mean, this guy's been through hell and back.
Yeah, for sure. And he has one of the things that made him so successful, that has made it so that he can have 45 books a year, it seems like, is
Yeah.
that he never really threw away anything. So he would write a story and stick it in a trunk or a drawer, and it would
Mm-hmm.
come back out in 15 or 20 years, and then he would retool it and add on a new ending or whatever, and then it would get published. So everything he wrote from the time he was about 11 eventually turned into a publication at some point. So because he held on to that and didn't
Right.
throw it away in self-hatred, he was able to build this
Yes.
incredible library of work.
Mm-hmm. And the person, believe it or not, and I just read this a couple weeks ago, about Carrie. He worked with Carrie. He started writing it in 72. Hated it. That had that imposter syndrome that all us writers have. That when are they going to find out I don't know what I'm doing? That's he had that. So he threw it in his junk drawer, his incunabula drawer. And it was his wife, Tabitha King, that discovered it. And she's like, "Steve, this is really good. Why is this in your, incunabula drawer?" And he goes, "Oh, it sucks. I've been doing that for 2 years." She goes, "No, no, no. You finish, you finish it. This is what's gonna launch you." 2 years later, we have Carrie. A month later, we got Salem's Lot and Cujo and Firestarter, all within 2 years after Carrie. Those four books came one, two, three, four. So if it hadn't been for Tabby King, Tabby, we might not have the Stephen King we have today.
Yeah. And he submitted stuff all the time. He kept all of his rejection letters on a spike in his room, like so he could track the stack as it was getting
Yep.
bigger and bigger, so they would all stay in the same place. And he he never gave up. He never considered that judgment of him as a person. He always felt like, okay, so this is
Right.
the right thing for this person at this time. That's fine. And he just kept it as kind of momentum to, keep working on it. And when he was right out of college, he and his wife got married and they had two kids. And he was
Hmm.
working as an English teacher at the local high school and writing
Yes.
and in his laundry room on at night and on the weekends. They put literally a TV tray with a typewriter in the
Yep.
laundry room for
Yep.
him.
Uh-huh.
And so he was building this life and they were so broke. He tells in his book on writing, he tells a story about his daughter, and he was carrying her into their mobile home because they were living in like this tiny mobile home, and she's got a fever, and he can basically feel the heat radiating off
Yeah.
of her, and she needs
Mhm.
antibiotics, and they can't afford it, and he's just in his head about this is not okay. I can't keep making my family do this. And as he's walking into the house, he opens the mailbox, and inside is a check for $500, the most he had ever earned as a writer. It covered the costs of the doctor and the medicine and everything for his daughter, and then a nice dinner afterward. And
Mhm.
those moments are the things that keep people going when they are pursuing a career like writer or actor or artist or whatever. And I think
Mhm.
part of the reason there are fewer writers, like in a real way today, a lot of people do like self-published stuff, but there are fewer writers pursuing it in this way today because there is no opportunity for you to submit a story for 25 bucks or 50 bucks or it's
Right.
all online for free. You got to do it yourself. You got to build up a TikTok following before anybody will pay any attention to you.
I actually have, this is embarrassing. I actually have framed my very first check that I ever made as a writer. $17.50, baby. But in 1985, okay, for a girl that had only been in the working world for about a year and a half, that was hot shit. And but what it did is it gave me impetus to keep going, just like, and when I read in the notes, that in your notes, about how the check for $500 exactly when he needed it like that, I was immediately reminded of this line from A Streetcar Named Desire, where Blanche Dubois says, "Sometimes there's God so suddenly."
And when he talks about through this whole process as he's doing this, they have no money. And when he sold Carrie, he just thought
Mhm,
he'd sold it and that was it. And then they came back to him for the hardback rights because he sold Carrie. He was given $2,500 advance, which was about a
mhm.
third of what he was earning annually as a teacher, which was cool, but not like life-changing money. And so then that was
What
the hardback.
do
And
you
then
still have the inflation calculator app? What would that be today?
do.
20.
Let me pull it up. And
Yes.
so in 1973, $2,500 is the equivalent of about $18,000 in 2025 money. So,
Holy crap.
like,
Yeah.
it's the most that he earned, and it was a huge deal. But if somebody hands you $18,000, for most people, that's like, I'm going to fix my car, and I'm going to fix my garage door that hasn't worked in a while, and I'm going to
Yeah.
put some money aside for savings, and then that's gone. Like,
Aluminum siding. Yeah, exactly. Mhm.
and then yeah, that's done. So he had that, and it was exciting, and it made a big difference for them. And I think he said he bought a car with that money. But
Mhm.
it was $2,500, and so then later they came back and said that they were selling the paperback rights to Carrie for $400,000,
$1,000. Uh-huh.
and
Yep.
half of that went to the publishing company and half of that was his to keep. So when you think about $200,000 in 1973 money, that is the equivalent of $1,448,000 today.
I can't. My brain won't handle that.
So he got basically dropped into being a millionaire overnight because he
Wow.
wasn't expecting this. He was expecting maybe like 5 grand, maybe. And so
Right.
this was Mother's Day, and they called him and they were like, "We need you to sit down." And he kind of couldn't talk for a minute, and then he was like, "I need to go get my wife a really excellent Mother's Day present. This is such a big deal." And he walked to the store, which is like a little like five and dime kind of CVS type thing near them.
Like Woolworths or something like that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and he walked in and he couldn't find anything because it's a drugstore kind of thing. And so he got her a hair dryer and he brought it home And she came in the door and he handed her the hairdryer and said, $400,000. And they like lost their minds. As you should. If you basically get ripped
As
out of
you
poverty,
should.
like, and
Oh my God.
not just pulled out of poverty, but pulled out of poverty and shoved all the way to millionaire like that fast. That's
I'm
insane.
stunned he's not more messed up than he already is, you know? And we've examined on this podcast, we've talked a lot of times about the effects of sudden wealth on a young, on a young person. Just all of a sudden, what do I do? Do I get a money guy? How do I even find a money guy? I've never needed a money guy before, you know? Oh my gosh, that was wonderful. And especially we're talking about Carrie, there's a brand new Carrie version of Carrie coming out. Carrie's now been remade. This is the fourth remake. There's been two sequels, and let us not forget the Broadway musical. Actually, let's forget the Broadway musical. Weirdly, that Stephen King story has been adapted and readapted more often than any other Stephen King, which I find very strange. I mean, not his first one.
Well, I guess that's the oldest, so it's the one that's had the most time to be readapted over and over again.
Mhm. That's
Um,
true. Hmm.
but like the 2017 It remake, the part one and then part two
Yeah.
together, they were the most lucrative horror film ever produced, according to this
I'm
documentary.
embarrassed to say I didn't see those two. I was too busy being homeless. Um,
Now,
but
I still like the first one better. I feel like it
right.
fit more with what I imagine Stephen King's, It universe to be.
Yeah.
And Tim Curry, you're not going to do better than Tim Curry. That's just,
No.
it's just a thing that you're not going to be able to do better than.
No, exactly. And that's fine.
But the
Yeah.
remake was
Yes.
excellent. And the increased special effects, like the improvement in that over time, made a real difference in how this movie kind of felt. And they made Barb, the little girl, no, Bev, sorry, Bev, the little girl,
Beverly. Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Beverly. Right.
Beverly Marsh,
March.
they made her more in control of herself. Like in the first version, she was just abused by everyone and abused by everyone and abused by everyone. In this one, she was abused, but it was not the whole of her. They gave her strength.
Right.
And so there was some stuff that I think was better in the remake, but on the whole, I
Yeah.
still prefer the original.
Okay. Yeah. I agree. I like the first one very much too. I'll have the second one's on my list to watch. But I mean that first one was such a powerhouse. I mean, we mentioned Tim Curry. I talked about Gary Sinise, Laura Gianciancommo, am I not saying that right? Laura San Giacomo.
Well, that's also
I
still The
love.
Stand, not the original
Oh
It.
my God, what am I talking about? Was Don Cheadle in it? Don Cheadle, was he?
I don't remember if he was in the new one. He was not in the original. Um,
Okay. All right.
but it was the guy who played John Boy on the Waltons, and Jonathan
Oh, what's
Brandis
his
and
name?
Seth Green were the little kids. Like,
Okay. Oh, Richard Thomas. Richard Thomas. That was.
yeah, he talked about what he called the disease of rationality that sets in when you become an adult, and why so much
Uh-huh.
of his horror is set in children and teens because they haven't quite leaned into that rational side of themselves yet. They can still find the mystical. And he never stops writing. He writes all day, every day, essentially. Like, this is just what he does. And when they started producing his stuff for movies and TV, he really leaned into that. He has been a guest star in almost everything that he has had, the
No,
his work. And he even directed.
it's like Alfred Hitchcock. It's the game is like find Stephen King. Oh,
But he even directed Maximum Overdrive, which is not saying a lot because it was not a good movie, but
no.
he wanted to be part of it. He wanted to have his hands in it. And he even
Right.
talked about how he did not like Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining because he
Yeah.
felt like they cast for the end of the movie. That Jack
Hmm.
Nicholson played a psycho real well, but that he needed to not be psycho in the beginning of it, and that it really
Yes. Yeah. Oh, exactly. I knew even if I never read the book, I would have been from minute one. Yeah, that guy's gonna kill everybody. Yeah. Yeah. No, there was no gradual buildup with Jack Nicholson. And no shade against Jack Nicholson. I mean, he's a wonderful actor, but he's a character actor. He's typeset as that guy. So he made an excellent ending Jack Torrance, but not quite so much a beginning Jack Torrance.
Yeah, we've in the last couple of years been really introducing my daughter to horror in a real way, and she loves every second of it. And this year they did a showing of Stephen King's The Shining at a local theater for us. So we took her to see it, and she loved it because, it's so good. And then later we were watching another documentary about kind of King's work, and he said that Stanley Kubrick called him at like 2 a.m. They were filming overseas and he was in Maine, and he got a 2 a.m. phone call from Stanley Kubrick that just said, "Steven, do you believe in God?" And he was like, "I don't know, Stanley. That's a big question."
For 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, and then my daughter commented, "Well, I understand why he needed to ask. He was probably filming that scene where the guy dressed up like Winnie the Pooh did butt stuff with that other guy." And I was like, "Your memory's not 100%, but you're right on the money."
Yes. And there's an alarming number of articles online about that scene, and of course, I've read them all. Yeah, yeah, that's, that that's so funny. Oh my god, poor
But yeah, so Stephen King talked a lot in this documentary about his process. And he said, people say write about what you know, but in reality, it's not, because when you look back through his work, you can see where his personal life impacted everything he was doing. And especially The Shining, which was as close to an autobiographical story as he has ever written.
Right.
And so when he says, I don't really write what I know, but he very clearly does write what he knows. And he talked about how so many of his books are about cars and trucks and stuff because he said they are so large and it makes him feel so small next to these.
Yeah.
That's kind of a driving force behind when he's looking for inspiration.
Sure, like Christine from a Buick 8, the road virus heads north. I mean, this is just off the top of my head. And also I noticed, and I knew that his father had left when he was very, very young, but I didn't know until I was reading the notes that he was a lot of his characters have absent fathers or abusive fathers, like like Beverly Marsh, like in The Body, the novel I let that Stand By Me was based on. The protagonist's father is basically ignoring the young protagonist because the older brother, the favorite, had been killed in it was a farming accident. It wasn't the war, right? It was a
I don't remember
it was
100%.
a tragic, yeah, but he had died, and the family just went into shock and basically started ignoring the character that was the Stephen King Gary Sue character and it was just awful, awful. And of course, it's all over Pet Cemetery, the concept of, and I loved in your notes, and I know I'm getting off topic, but I loved in your notes how you wrote that Pet Cemetery was the one that disturbed him so much he had to stop writing it for a little bit.
Yeah.
That was one? Yeah.
That was so far the only one that he's ever spoken about being so frightening that he had to stop and walk away from it. And it's because that scene where the little boy runs out in front of the truck, his son was a hair's
Mm.
breadth away from that when he was 2.
I I mean, like I said, I've read pretty much all Stephen King, certainly not all of it, but Pet Cemetery is one of the ones that I have to be in a special kind of mood to read. And I can't read it at night, and I can't read it when I'm alone in the house. It's so embarrassing. Although King would be like, "Yeah, I did my job," but although I've never had that happen, I have a very dear friend who has a son. The son is now 33, I think. But but when the son was maybe 8 or 9, my friend they were moving houses, and so my friend and his older son, who was in his teens at the time, packed up the family truckster, and they pulled out of the driveway, and they forgot the son, the little boy, who was standing in the driveway. Because it was one of those, you got your eye on the kid? Yeah, where is he? Don't you know where he is? No, you had to watch him. Dad, you had one job. Yeah. And even though the boy, nothing happened to him, of course, he was in his driveway, the kid wasn't even traumatized because the car wasn't even out. Right. But to this day, you can't talk about it without getting so emotional, even though it was like 30 some 25 years ago, nothing bad happened.
When you are a parent, you are going to have that kind of moment because your child is a separate person and they have no self-preservation instinct. And so you're dealing with that. We had that moment, or at least I had that moment, when my daughter was like 3. We were in
Mhm.
Massachusetts and we were touring a reproduction of the Mayflower. And,
Okay.
it's fun, take the kid out, let her see a boat. And I had her with me and I had her
Mhm.
by the hand and I let go for half a second and I turned around and I saw her leaning over to look down a bell chute that had no protective anything. And in my head, she was already gone. Like
Oh, yes.
I
Oh, I'm
had that
sure.
panic moment. I had to reach out and grab her and make sure she was okay. And then she was carried through the rest of the boat. But you have those moments because your kid just doesn't know, and you cannot be 100% aware of everything all the time. It's not
Yeah.
humanly possible.
Right.
And we all have been very near death, and all of our parents have freaked out about that, and we just don't remember because we were very little. But
Yes,
it's
exactly. No, no, my I used to hide in the clothing racks like the kids did in stores. Scared the hell out of my mom and dad. So for I was like, do not let go of my or daddy's hand. Okay. I mean, my best friend, her son is now 32, and to her, to this day, she has, and this is a Stephen King story waiting to happen. She has this anxiety dream, this repeating anxiety dream, where he is a child and he's buried alive in the backyard, and she's clawing him out. Doesn't have any tools. She's using her bare hands to dig him out of the ground before he runs out of air. She always saves him. She always saves him, but I can't imagine, especially being a lucid dreamer, I can't imagine how petrifying that would be, you know. And there's no logic as to how he got underground. That's how the dream starts. She's aware he's buried alive in the backyard, and just clawing with her face. Oh my God.
those moments are, I think, where Stephen King finds himself and where he
Hmm.
starts writing from. And my favorite Stephen King novels are never the huge ones. Like I like them. They're all good. But my very
Yep.
favorite Stephen King novel never has been adapted, never will be adapted. It's Rose Matter. I don't know if you've read that one.
Yes, I have that. It was the Minotaur,
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah.
And Rose Madder was the name of the color paint that she was, and she was married to an abusive husband, again, an abusive husband
An
named
abusive police
Norman.
officer. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, named Norman, who would poke her with I'm doing this like you can sit there. Poke her with sharpened pencils for that little drop of blood. And that was the one morning, that's what made her to leave him. She was changing the sheets and there was this teeny tiny pinprick of blood, and that's what did it. That's what
Yeah.
did it. That's fascinating. I've never known anybody who knew enough about Rose Madder, let alone liked it that much. Good for you.
Yeah, I mean, and her character, she's badly abused. Like he kicks her down the stairs when she's pregnant and she loses the baby and like it's this whole thing. And watching her go through that process of she sees that drop of blood on the sheets and she's like, I have to leave. I can't stay. And as
Right.
she's leaving, she's thinking,
Right.
okay, he's a cop. So this is how I have to know that this is how he thinks. And he's talked about the one that stuck with me was he talked about how people think they are making random decisions, but there's nothing random about how your brain works. And so, like, if you're trying to follow
Oh,
someone, that you tend to, if they're right hand,
right.
you want to lean towards right turns because you're going to go the direction of your dominant
Right.
hand. And then she goes and she builds this life for herself, like a happy, wonderful life where she's recording audiobooks and like living this wonderful life. And she has this painting and they get kind of sucked into that Minotaur's world, her and her cop ex-husband.
Right.
And the story, like I'm not gonna go
Mhm.
into the whole thing, but I loved that so much. Like it really touched a part of me that Stephen King's work typically doesn't. And I liked that one so much. And
Mhm.
I know that it's like his least popular book. Nobody's ever gonna turn that into anything. And I'm like, well, you made Maximum Overdrive a movie. You should make this one a movie. You know?
Yeah, really. Yeah. Well, I think one of the reasons, I mean, knowing you as well as I do, I think one of the reasons you like Rose Batter is it's empowering for women.
Yeah, for sure. And
Y-
the
Yeah.
bad guy
Yeah.
was human. Like yes, there was a Minotaur and there was other
Mhm.
supernatural stuff, but the villain was a normal dude.
And with Stephen King, of course, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I really felt
Yep.
that one was scarier than some of his others because that's a real person. An abusive cop ex-husband. There's a bunch of women in this country who can talk about that. Like in watching this documentary, like getting to hear his take on his work and kind of why he does things the way he does. Like he sets most of his stories in Maine because that's where he lives, and he sets stories where he lives because, you know, that's he felt like that's what he was built to do. Those are the places that are his, quote unquote, and that he
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
kind of bring you there. But he also
Mhm.
said that the people in Maine treat him like a regular guy and not a freak. And he is so comfortable with that that that's his comfort zone is kind of rural Maine.
Except for the doctor that lives across the street from him, because that's the guy that Stephen King calls when he has a medical question. Like there was he, I remember word for word. He was talking about the short story he wrote called Survivor Type, which is wonderfully gruesome. It's about a surgeon that gets shipwrecked on a desert island. And well, he's got his medical bag with him and lots of heroin. And there's nothing to eat on the island. And well, shall we say nature takes its course? So he calls up his doctor friend and he goes, "Hey, listen, I got thinking about cannibalism today, because that's the sort of thing people like me sit around thinking about." And I can just see the doctor going, "Oh my God." And he goes, how much can a man eat of himself before he starts to go crazy?" And the doctor, knowing that, he goes, "Well, it depends on how much shock trauma the body can stand. It's different for everybody." And so Stephen King goes, "Okay." So then he writes, "I think this doctor is kind of afraid to take my calls now because last time I called him, I asked if a man could swallow a cat." I can see his wife answering the phone going, "Hold on, honey, Steve King's on the phone again." Oh.
I imagine that doctor looks at the phone the way Stephen King looked at the phone. He's like, fucking Stanley Kubrick? It's 2 a.m., dude. What? What?
Right, what? You believe in God. God. So there we go. Let's all prank call Stephen King and ask
No,
him.
no, we are not recommending anybody prank call Stephen King. Please do not do
No,
that.
no, no,
Tell
no.
him
Do
we
not.
told you to do that.
So do not tell. Yes, do not. But send him fan mail. He does love get. I did read. He loves getting fan mail. He really, really does. As would Rachel and I enjoy fan mail. So
Yes,
make
please.
comments. Put comments in the YouTube things.
We
Do
do
all the interactions. Yep.
we do love that. Yeah, so definitely leave us comments, send us messages. Um, but yeah, and Stephen King talked about how his works are so popular because they address like economically disadvantaged parts of the country. and he feels like people know he's not judging them.
Right.
And that so much
Right.
of the literature out there feels like it's the intelligentsia crowd that they're appealing to. And he's just trying to reach everyday people.
Yeah, Stephen is never going to be part of the Algonquin round table. And he's one of the, he's a wonderful example because he's experienced pretty much the entire spectrum of economics. Dirt poor, lower middle class, wealthy. In fact, he's never forgotten his roots. And he still writes for the common man, for lack of a better term. Because and that way I think everybody who likes horror, and of course it's not for everybody, but everybody who likes horror should give King a chance. If you haven't already, you will find something out there you relate to, whether it's one of his funny little toss away stories, something deep and profound like It, or The Stand, or um there's something for everybody with King. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think in your mentioning that, I think Stephen King might be the person who has traveled the farthest up the economic ladder, going from essentially nothing as a child to being a multimillionaire dozens of times over. I think he might
Yeah,
have
that's a
the
good point.
widest economic disparity.
Wow. What an accomplishment, man. What a guy.
Yeah. And he doesn't just do novels. He does short story collections and stuff. And I think those are some of my favorite. Like I loved Just After Sunset, the short story collection that he created. Um and
Hmm.
there's one story in there that was called N, just the letter N.
Oh,
Um
I my dad and I loved N.
that freaked me out so bad that I had to close all the blinds because I couldn't see the brick walls of the neighbor's house. I was like, no, it's too much. It's too much. He made brick walls scary.
It's so much. He made brick walls scary. He made towels scary. Swear to God, to this day, every time I drive past a field and there are rocks there, I'm afraid to count them. Like, damn you, Stephen King.
Yeah, and he talks about how his writing process that he writes every story and book twice. The first time through, he's concerned
Mhm.
about the emotional gradient of it, the finding the emotion and putting it on paper. And then the second time through, he reads what he wrote and finds the symbolism and kind of teases that out of the story to expand on it. Like he talks about the first time he wrote Carrie, he wasn't thinking about blood in any real way, but he found that it came up 3 or 4 times in the story. And so
Oh, blood is very constant.
yeah, so he had to pull that together and think about, well, what does blood symbolize? Why is it important? What does it mean within the context of the story?
The novel begins our very first scene with blood, and the very last scene is blood, menstrual blood to be particular. Two different characters, but it's a beautiful tie up. It really really is.
But yeah, I remember that being used as an example of a writer who really knows women, and that Stephen
Uh
King
huh. Uh huh.
himself is not that person, but Tabitha King has her hands in everything he writes, and you can see that.
Absolutely. You can see her handprints all over some of that stuff, sure. Especially the stories that are written in first person from a woman's point of view. I'm thinking particularly of Big Driver, which is a novelette in, oh God, I forget what collection it is, but it's about a female writer who's going to a writing conference as the guest speaker, and she's afraid to fly. So she drives and unfortunately ends up getting raped. And Stephen King in real life is afraid to fly. I mean, can you believe this? Stephen King is afraid of something as jejune as as flying, but he's like, nope, always got to take a couple Xanax and a Bloody Mary, and then wake me up when I get there. But if it's if it's on the same landmass, he will drive there. Yeah, he's really afraid of flying. So naturally, it's I think way to face one of those fears is to just write a story about one of the singular worst things that can happen to a woman. just because she, you know, was striking out on her own. So, yeah, definitely I think Tabitha had a say in that too. She's great. And she's a writer on her own. I know she's written at least 2 novels, probably more. Um, but check her out too. Absolutely.
Yeah, and apparently she's a poet. And
Yeah.
Stephen King talks about how when they met, they were in a writing class together, or a
Mhm.
writing group, and that he would listen to other people read their stupid poetry that meant nothing, that just was words that sounded nice together. And then Tabitha would get up and read her poem, and he would say, "That's actually a good poem. It means something. It has, something behind it." And the writing is good, and so, like, he was attracted to her in part because of her writing.
It's oh yeah, definitely. Because good writer means high intelligence, which usually means funny, and those that's the trifecta. This is what I tell my male friends. If you're funny, smart, and witty and charming, man, we'll fall like Skylab. That's and there's maybe like 9 people listening to this who will know what Skylab was. Yeah, intelligent, funny, and good looking. That's it. That's all we need.
Well, and writers are generally speaking pretty introspective. Like, they're learning about themselves, they're learning about
Yeah.
other people to be able to put these stories on paper. And I mean, Stephen King even said in this documentary, you write books to find out how you feel about things. If you know the exact same amount when you finish a book as you did when you started it,
Yeah.
it's probably going to be a bad book. So, somebody who is a writer in a real way and puts stories together like this, that's somebody who has an understanding of themselves and the world around them and a curiosity to keep learning about those things. That's definitely a plus.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. Wow. What a great episode this was.
I know. And we didn't even get to like where he talks about
Yeah.
how he foresaw Donald Trump. And he didn't know specifically that it was going to be Donald Trump, but he knew that this bloviating bag of hot air and fascism that was going to end up in front of us
Right.
be our president.
Right.
Like,
Oh, yes.
he saw that coming, and he even said in one of the quotes in the documentary was, "If someone offers you a Bible in exchange for your right hand, sooner or later they're going to put a gun in your left." Like that.
I love that. I love that. And this is something in the Dead Zone that I only caught, I think, the 3rd time reading it because, the protagonist in the Dead Zone is able to touch objects and read who owns it or something, and it was a throwaway line where he's at a restaurant and he's getting his coat out of the coat closet and he touches somebody else's coat and this terrifying, revolting, sickening feeling went through him, and he realized that the owner of that coat was going insane. And it took me 3 tries to figure out, "Oh my god, that's Martin Sheen's coat that he's touching in that cloakroom in the restroom." And he's restroom, the cloakroom in the restaurant, and that he is the one who is slowly going insane. And like I said, it's a throwaway line. He never mentions it again. But when you reread it, you're like, "Why didn't I see that? Oh my god." Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of his
Great
stuff
stuff.
has been very prescient, and some of his newer stuff, even the really positive, like life affirming things. Most recently, Mike Flanagan just released the Life of Chuck movie interpretation
Okay.
of his story, The Life of Chuck, which I don't know if you've read. Um,
I have not.
it is phenomenal. It is this. When we left the theater, my husband looked at me and said, "We need to own that because when I'm having a bad day and I'm feeling bad about myself, I need to watch that." So it
The
was
Life of Chuck,
The
like
Life of Chuck,
Chuck. Okay.
UCK.
Writing it down.
Um,
Okay.
it is starring Tom Hiddleston and a bunch of really famous actors that you will recognize from other things. And I'm not going to tell you literally anything about it because the first third of the movie is
Okay.
to figure out who the fuck is Chuck. Why is he important?
Okay. Why is Chuck important? Okay.
Um, but it is such a positive, uplifting movie, and still within it, there is horror, supernatural elements that
Nice.
is, you would expect in a Stephen King story. but he manages to make this horrible thing so beautiful and positive and wonderful. There's just nothing at all like a Stephen King story. And when you watch it, this story is not new. This is one that
Right.
he's been working on, for putting together the movie for a couple of years. But you will feel so much like it could have been written in 2025, that there's so much of kind of the world reflected in this story. It's kind of evergreen, and it's if when you get the chance, you should watch that one or read the story because it's so good.
I got it written down. That's on my list now. Wonderful. The Life of Chuck. Great. Oh,
Yep.
all
So
right. One question, gun to your head. What's your favorite non-horror Stephen King?
my favorite non-horror Stephen King. I feel like that's got
Mm-hmm.
to be Shawshank.
Me too. Me
Yeah.
too. I was good. Yeah, Shawshank. I mean, there's horror elements in it, but I agree with that little old lady in the wheelchair that it was uplifting, happy ending, and like I just weep a little bit at the end, when he says, what is it? I hope the Pacific is as blue as in my dreams. I hope to meet my friend and shake his hand. I hope, and I just go. Oh. So, yep.
Yeah, I've non-horror Stephen King, he's got a fair amount of it, and it's all so good. And I
Yeah.
just recently, like in the last 2 or 3 years, watched Stand By Me for the first time, and that was incredible. So
Oh, it's wonderful.
yeah, I was very impressed with that. Yeah,
Beautiful coming of age story.
I mean, even his stuff that's not good is still fun. Like The Langoliers is
Mhm.
probably not a great movie or a book, but it was so fun. Like I love that concept of creatures that eat time as a as a villain or a
Yeah.
monster.
Oh, yeah. I envision them as like these nefarious just coming after you.
Yeah, so Stephen King just by embracing who he is, by embracing what makes him him and what's important to him, and really leaning into what he knows to be his talents, made
Mm.
himself among the richest writers in the world, among the best-selling authors in the world. Like we said earlier, I think he might have the widest span from going from being the poorest to the richest, like
Yeah.
that difference of anybody in the country for sure. So
Oh, and I think that's why he's so down to earth, very approachable, loves his fans, loves going on tour and talking to his fans and tells these funny stories and still going strong. And my mug is empty, but hey, long live the king, man. Dude, you know?
well, and he even said at one point in an interview that somebody asked him when they could consider themselves a professional writer. And he said, when you can pay a bill with what you've earned, you're a professional writer. So if you got paid $50 and you used 44 of that to pay your phone bill, you're a professional writer, according to Stephen King.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Ah, that's wonderful. I was at a horror con years ago, and Stephen King was a panelist. And everybody always asks him, what scares you? And you said everything. But this particular question was, what do you ever have nightmares about what you write? And he went, I've never had a nightmare about something I've written. He goes, but I will tell you my repeating anxiety nightmare. He goes, when I'm on it, and it always happens when I'm on a deadline. He goes, I'm sitting in a room and I'm at my desk, and there's this old, like 1940s Underwood typewriter that I have to like bang the keys. And he goes, and I'm late on the deadline, and the clock is ticking. And behind me in a closet is a scary thing. Well, what was the thing? He goes, well, I don't know. That's why it's scary. He goes, I just know it's scary. And if I don't finish, it's going to come out and get me. And we all kind of giggled because we've all had that kind of anxiety dream, right? If something
Yeah.
horrible happened, if we're not done. And I didn't have the courage to say this, but I'm sitting here thinking, turn your desk around so you can see the scary thing. Come on, Steve-O. But it makes me feel a little better that he has the same version of that anxiety dream that I know that as a writer, you have been on those deadlines. As a writer, I've been on those deadlines. So I just didn't ever imagine being fired was my biggest anxiety, not a monster in a closet.
But I think we should wrap this up. So let me read this outro. Thank
Do it.
yes. Thanks for listening to Real Stories, Real Problems with your hosts, Rachel and Roxanne. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into career success and Stephen King, A Necessary Evil. Join us again next week for a glimpse into another financial problem and a documentary all about it. If you enjoyed our show today, please remember to like, subscribe, and leave us a review on your podcast app. Thanks for listening. See you again next week.
Bye for now.